Welcome to the program, Dushyant. Good to have you.
Nice to be here on this platform. Thank you.
I always ask my guests, how did you come to Treasury and why did you choose Treasury as your career?
Yeah, good question. I've not had that long of a career, to be honest with you. I mean, I've only been in my professional experience has only been about 15 years or less. But when I started out, I obviously started out in a analytical area. It was more accounting focused. When I started out, I had a role where I did a lot of reconciliation work within the fixed income products. CDs and bonds and so I kind of built my professional background starting off of that role, and held various sort of roles within the accounting team and FP&A function. And the treasury role and the way I got into treasury was really a opportunity that came about in the company that I used to work for called MetLife, and that opportunity was when I read the role, the description, and what the role entailed, it was very fascinating to me, and I was very curious about how treasury function worked, because I never came into treasury directly, so I was always curious about the role, and I feel like I could perform some most of the functions that the role required, and it was also a partnership with the current role that I was into, which was in the FP&A. We used to work very closely with the treasury team, and I knew the person that was hiring for the role, and I kind of networked and I talked to the hiring manager, and kind of reiterated my interest in this role, and that's how I got into treasury. And that was 9 years ago. So now, being a treasurer of a bank, I kind of look back and say to myself that, hey, that was a great move, because treasury, I feel like, is really the hub of everything that happens in a company, right? And you get to see a lot of things from a 30,000 square foot view, and it's really really exciting, sort of a role and sort of the team to sort of work in, and also be that strategic partner. So that's how I kind of came about in treasury.
It's interesting, Dushyant, that pretty much everyone, all of my listeners and pretty much everyone in treasury, I think, either started in accounting like yourself or in banking, and then moved into treasury. And we've got a few things going on at the moment where we're trying to create some education and courses and the like around the treasury space in order to help people discover it a little bit earlier. But just to understand, so when you said you started in accounting, you started with Barclays. You then moved to Alico in the RMBS, CMBS space for a couple of years. And then the role that you mentioned, you moved to MetLife, where you came to treasury and spent 6 years with them across ratings, capital, liquidity. And then you've spent years with Cross River Bank in that fintech neobank world. So just to give the listeners a little bit of back history there. What would you say have been some of the career highlights in your mind so far?
Yeah, if I had to pick one at this current stage of my career, it would definitely be, navigating through the pandemic, right? And sort of helping the bank that I work for think through some of those strategic decision making and some of the challenges that the bank faced, and to be honest, to sort of go through that I definitely learned a lot, but you also need to have that, sort of wherewithal to make those decisions, to be confident in the conversations that you're having with the senior management, with the board, but then also sort of manage the expectation of the seat, right, of the treasurer. So, um, so for me, the highlight would be to making sure that the bank was adequately capitalized. We had the adequate funding necessary to to sort of survive through this pandemic, and making sure that, especially just from a bank perspective, making sure that our depositors were protected. So it was sort of like, for me, it was a big learning experience. And I started my career right at the beginning of the credit crisis of 2008. So I had that sort of in the back of my mind that it's really important to sort of manage risk prudently, and having that experience, I guess, sort of taught me to make sure that you need treasurer seat is sort of that the seat that will be the steward of the risk management, and that's something that I've kind of applied in this role, and probably would be sort of my highlight over the past like 1 year.
I would imagine, like a lot of fintech sort of neobanks through the pandemic, it's also played into your hands as a business, the way that things have played out. Has that been the case with Cross River Bank as well?
Not as much. We really thought that this was it was a different type of crisis, right? Like, it was more of more of a like a left tail black swan type of event, where it was not systemic but could go into more of a systemic issue. And learning from the 2008 2009 crisis, it very well would have gone into that situation, unless the government did not sort of intervene and did the monetary the monetary stimulus, but also the fiscal stimulus that was needed to sort of bring about the country to kind of up on its feet. So we first thought that, look, this would be a sort of a credit crisis type of situation, and it would be it would all the banks would sort of experience this, but that was not sort of the case. So, and Cross River has really been really active in its community, but overall it's been active through the whole PPP process, which is the Paycheck Protection Program that the government started to sort of help out those businesses that were really affected by the pandemic and COVID-19. And Cross River has probably is the top 5 or the top 3 leader in sort of the small business loans that the government is actually giving out.
Has networking been a part of your career development, Dushyant?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sort of a person that's semi extrovert, and I'm always interested and always curious about different industries, and how my peers are sort of problem solving some of the situations, and it's always been a sort of a point that I always try to make sure that I'm speaking to my peers, not only for the problem solving situation, but then also just in general, where do they think that the industry is going, right? Like, what are some of the key strategic pain points that they're sort of experiencing? What are some of the innovations that are happening in the Treasury ERP systems? And those are some of the questions that I always ask. But then also, there are situations where there is an important role that they're offering, and it's always a conversation piece where, okay, well, where do you see this role, like what do you see this role do, or how is this helping the company? So those types of conversations are always sort of that I'm always talking through with my peers. So networking is definitely an important piece of that equation. Being in treasury.
What about mentors, Dushyant? Have mentors been a part of your career so far?
If I had to talk about mentors, it's really been the great managers that I have had in my career, and some of them were good, some of them are bad. But what I try to do is I try to sort of pick the great things that they've done, right? I'll give an example where I had a manager where we used to do a lot of reconciliation work, and it was very heavy Excel based, and a lot of it was Excel modeling based. So one of the things that sort of he taught me was to never take your fingers off of the keyboard and don't use the mouse, right? So those are some of the things that I thought that, hey, you know what, these are this is whatever, right? I don't like it. I want to do the things that I'm kind of used to, but he kind of like forced me to do things that were actually more efficient. And I kind of look back and I say, well, you know what, that was actually, that was great, because now I can perform, work or whatever, what have you, in a more efficient way. So in that sense, I think I've had, great mentors, but they were mostly, the managers that have been in my past. And there are some managers that have challenged me, and sort of made me, the person who I am, as far as like my work is concerned, and the discipline that I have.
What's the one piece of advice that you wish you had have known back when you were starting your career that you know now, or you'd like to pass on to the listeners?
Yeah, one thing that I would probably advise, some of the junior folks, is to not be afraid of taking risks. Always sort of look for more challenges, more opportunities. If you are bored of doing sort of some of the same things day in and day out, maybe go up to your manager and say, hey, you know what, I have extra capacity, or I have the bandwidth to take on additional work. And they may have some work that they think that, hey, you know what, it would be a good sort of a learning experience for the junior leverage to sort of tackle. And that probably would be my advice, is to take those risks, right? Take those risks, not only in the work that you're doing, but also network as well. And sort of going back to my point of networking via, either it's through your school alumni network, or if it's some job that you've seen posted online, and a certain person from your school or from your previous job that works there. Just ask them for, hey, for their advice, like, hey, this is a really interesting spot, like, can we have like 30 minutes on the calendar to just talk about it? So networking is also key, as well. And that's something that no one kind of advised me on, and I sort of learned that through my experience. And yeah, those are the two things that I would probably advise.
Right. What are the key things that you look for when you're hiring your direct reports, Dushyant?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I look for. First of all, being in treasury, I think it's really important to be detail oriented. You need to have that analytical mindset, and you need to be good with numbers, right? So those are some of the base things that I look for. Number one. Number two is how are your soft skills, right? Because it's really important to be a good communicator. And if you can't distill complex situations or problems into more simpler terms that someone can understand, if you can't do it, then someone else won't understand what you're saying, right? So, take an example of, let's just say if you're speaking to a board member, right? There are some board members that are not financially, I wouldn't say savvy, but they're from a different industry. Maybe there's a board member that has had legal experience, right? But not more of into the weeds finance experience. So explaining situations that are financially related, and be able to distill those sort of financial concepts into something that they can understand is very important. So good communication skills, and be able to formulate your assumptions and explaining why you view some of those assumptions is really important. So I look for their train of thought, and how they problem solve.
Definitely. What do you think makes a successful treasurer in the eyes of the C-suite and senior management?
Yeah, good question. Look, I mean, treasury and the treasurer is really the person that the CFO or the CEO goes to if they have something that is that they're going to be able to leverage their skill set, not only for being analytical, but at the same time having the strategic mindset, right? So a lot of asks that I get is, how do you manage risk, right? And what is the right path to do it? And how do you sort of optimize our sort of current sort of situation that we're in, right? So the most important skill set that I would think a treasurer would have in the mind of a CEO or CFO is to be, number one, a good communicator. Going back to the point of those basic skill sets that I kind of look for. Number two is, as you move up and you get more responsibilities, you also get the responsibility of managing a team, right? So being a good people leader and managing those expectations is also important, because what happens is when you do a 360 review of, when someone does a 360 review of self of you, they're not only they're not only discussing you as how you work with them, but they also talk about how you are how do you manage the junior leverage, right? How do you manage your team? How do you manage the internal and the external stakeholders that surround you? So that's very crucial part of someone that's at the seat of in treasury. So good communication skills, good people leadership skills, and someone who gets their hands dirty, right? And also is that sort of that the steward of risk management practices. So those 3 or 4 things are pretty big in the eyes of the C-suite.
Dushyant, technology has changed rapidly and continues to be the case. How do you see the role of the treasurer changing in the coming years with that technology advancement?
Yeah. So I mean, what I have experienced is over time, I think technology has played a bigger and bigger role in some of the day-to-day stuff that we do, right? So take an example for a treasury ERP system. Like, these were not there. I mean, they were there, but they were not as advanced as they are now. A lot of the work that's done is really heavily Excel based, right? Microsoft Excel based, and a lot of the stuff is just modeling your financial models or what have you. So what used to happen, what's happening now is that we're using 80% of the time just creating models and building models, and only 20% of the time is what we're using to make those recommendations, those strategic recommendations that are sort of required day to day, or even at the high level when we look at long term. But I think technology sort of is going to change that, right? So in my mind, I see Treasury, being more of that strategic partner to the, to its own organization, and using the 80-20 rule, right? Where, for example, if we do 80% modeling and 20% more strategic, I think it would flip, right? Where it's more 80% is more of that strategic conversations that happen between the treasurer, the CFO, or CEO, and the 20% is sort of that the manual intervention that happens between the models and what comes out of the models, and then translate that into those decisions. I think technology will definitely be that leverage to sort of pivot those two percentages.
Dushyant, it's been a pleasure chatting to you. Thank you so much for your insights. I've really enjoyed our chat today.
Yep, my pleasure. Thanks, Simon.